Jeff Grimes is coming back to Waco with one of the best offenses in the conference and is looking to crush Baylor's Big 12 championship dreams, just like we all thought. Let's get locked on Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Gametime. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. We're starting to look at Kansas a little bit and the homecoming for Jeff Grimes and how awkward that might be. We actually heard from Dave Aranda about this on Monday, and looking at a controversial video in the Big 12 and why it is controversial, because it probably shouldn't be, and a big-time recruit basketball-wise in the class of 2025 making his decision today, and why it still could be Baylor. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. The Kansas Jayhawks roll into Waco this weekend. I think a fascinating matchup. Anyone who's been paying attention to college football knows that Kansas is one of the hottest teams in the country and still have a ton of talent. And yet, if they don't win this game, they're not going to a bowl. It seems crazy. And one of the reasons why they have turned this season around and have become the first team with a losing record to knock off 3 straight ranked opponents is because of a high-powered offense. In fact, one of the most explosive offenses in this conference and therefore in the country. Because the two teams with the most explosive plays in the Big 12 this year are the teams. First off is the team that Jeff Grimes was the OC for last year, and second is the team that Jeff Grimes is the OC for this year. Baylor number 1, Kansas number 2. We are going to see some points on Saturday, and they're going to come in two very different styles. Even though Baylor runs the ball really well, we obviously know what that wide zone offense looks on the other side, and it doesn't look the same as what this spread attack from Jake Spavital's group is going to look like. But there's going to be something here, some underlying tension here. And I don't know how much these guys are going to play into it during the week, especially with it being Thanksgiving week, so a little less media coverage. But there is something here between this Jeff Grimes and Dave Aranda relationship, this Jeff Grimes and Baylor relationship, which is interesting because he's got one of his sons playing for him at Kansas, a former Baylor commit, and his other son is playing for Baylor. So it's a really interesting dynamic here for this homecoming. First to be asked about it was Dave Aranda in his Monday press conference. Here's what Dave Aranda had to say about bringing his old OC back to the friendly confines of McLean Stadium.
You know Jeff Grimes pretty well. Does that change things, make it easier? And will it be, good to see him at all?
It'd be good to see him. I know that he's going to be looking at, he's going to look at all of it, but he's going to look at Iowa State, and that was probably our worst game. And he's going to want to replicate a lot of the things that were in that game. And so we're going to have to play much better than we did back then.
It'll be good to see him. Now here's all the football stuff. He didn't wait around too long on that sentiment, which is okay. I also do find it interesting that he talks about that Jeff Grimes is going to be looking at that Iowa State game in particular because it was the worst defensive game that Baylor's played. It was also almost 2 whole months ago. Like it was a month and a half ago. It was October 6th that they played that game against Iowa State. So is it beneficial for him to look at that, Dave? As in, like, has the defense not improved enough on anything? Have they not made adjustments? Are they still that team that was playing up in Ames? Because I know the defense hasn't been great throughout this winning streak, but that would not give me much confidence from a Baylor standpoint of things. And on the Jeff Grimes standpoint of things, he said earlier this year, I believe the quote was something along the lines of, yeah, I've got that date circled on my calendar, November 30th, back in Waco, against the team and coaching staff that fired him last year, and that some have, seen Jeff Grimes as a scapegoat. And there is something to that. Let me, from my opinion, obviously the end of the Jeff Grimes tenure was not a good offense. Like, let's be very clear on that. But I also think there was plenty of other problems in that 22 and 23 seasons. And it was once again Dave Aranda firing coordinators. And apparently this time it worked. But then again, it also worked for Jeff's first year at Baylor, where he had his full complement of a run-first football team. A lot of it still left over from Matt Rule, who was a run-first coach, and you saw pretty good results out of that. But Jeff has come into KU, and it started pretty slow. It started 1-5, and it was all the message boards, all the Twitter comments. The people that were following Kansas football were losing their minds, saying, why did we bring this guy in? Look at what happened at Baylor the last few years. How are we surprised by this? Go ask the Baylor fans. This is the experience, running to the boundary side. Baylor fans were so sick of it by the end of it. And here we go with Kansas, and they're doing the same thing with real good veteran players on that side, Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal and the rest. Well, since they fell to 1-5, Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal and the rest started to look like Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, and the rest. Good, all-conference caliber players who have played a lot of football games. That's what they've looked like since then. And in 6 of their last 7 games, they have scored 27+. And the only game they didn't in that stretch, which does include some losses, but the only game they didn't in that stretch score 27 points was when they beat BYU on the road 17-13, which is even more impressive because that's not the way they're built. But the wide zone has taken off in Lawrence. And again, they have turned into one of the best offenses in the conference. And what's really funny is that Baylor and Kansas were 2 of the worst offenses in the Big 12 before Big 12 play started. And now they are the 2 best. Them with Colorado, those are the best in the conference. So this has got to be interesting for Jeff in terms of he's got a son playing on the other side. Garrison Grimes still finishing out his eligibility at Baylor. And I know there was some frosty feelings in terms of, his other son, Graydon, China Spring Great, was supposed to play at Baylor. He was committed to it, and then he ends up going with his dad to Kansas, understandably so. And there was rumors that there wasn't a lot of contact between the coaching staff and Graydon Grimes at that time, which would be, I think, a bad look on the Baylor coaching staff, or on Dave Aranda, I guess. And obviously, Grimes has plenty of motivation coming into this game. And I think we are going to see an absolute track meet because neither of these defenses are, covering themselves in glory. And both offenses are explosive as hell. It's going to be a ton of fun with a lot on the line. Like, Baylor can still, there is a scenario that's not completely doomsday for Baylor to go to the Big 12 championship game if they win this game. And for Kansas, with all those veteran guys and those leadership guys who really felt like they were turning around the program, right? Made it to a bowl game in 2022, had a good season last year, were picked to win the conference by some this year in the preseason. They want to at least get to a bowl game. They don't want this thing to end on a losing record, especially the way they've played the last month. You've got the 2 hottest teams in this conference matching up against each other in this game. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. But I do believe that Jeff Grimes can expose this Baylor defense even further. I mean, you look at the metrics on all the EPA and things like that for the Kansas offense. I look at Baylor, and they've got pretty good numbers. Their EPA margin, their EPA on rushes and dropbacks, and their net points per drive, all that fun, deep analytical stuff. Kansas is even better. They're even better. The EPA margin's pretty good for Baylor. It's 43rd in the country. Kansas is 12 spots higher. Offensively, they're top 20. They're top 20 in offensive success rate. So think of how good Baylor's offense has been in the last month and a half. Their offensive success rate is 34th. Kansas is 17th. And their efficacy rate, their success rate on rushes is 45 spots higher than Baylor, who has been running the ball pretty well the last month. This Kansas offense is elite, especially the last couple of weeks, to the point where I'm surprised Baylor is a 1.5 point favorite. And that's what they're opening at. Like, maybe I'm talking myself towards the ledge, but this Kansas offense is really, really good. And Jeff Grimes is going to be very motivated to win this game. Earlier in the offseason, I looked at this game in particular and said, oh, Kansas is going to have a good team. Jeff Grimes is going to have a bee under his bonnet. Like, this could, I literally said on this show, this could be a game where Kansas is battling for a spot in the Big 12 championship game and only Baylor is in their way. Well, it's almost flipping the script. Kansas is not the only team in Baylor's way, but it's Baylor that can get there to the Big 12 championship. Kansas can get to a bowl game, which is ultimately what they want and how they want to finish this season off. Oh boy, it's going to be a real fun one at McLean Stadium on Saturday morning, 11 a.m., nice and early for you guys. Get those turkey naps in on Thursday and Friday. We got football Saturday morning, and that's going to be a real doozy of a game, let me tell you. Speaking of real doozy, something in the BYU-Arizona State game was crazy. Actually, there were plenty of things that were crazy. Not the thing that was crazy is the one that's causing controversy right now. We'll catch you up on that coming up on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Guys, we need you at this game Saturday morning at McLean Stadium. We need the elite atmosphere that the Baylor fans provided against TCU during the last home game. We need that again. And the way to get your tickets, if you don't already have them, is through Gametime. Okay, you go on the app, you can toggle the all-in pricing tool. So that price you see is the price you are going to pay. Don't let the Jayhawks infiltrate McLean Stadium. Plus, you are going to get the view from your seats before you hit purchase. So, pretty strong sun out today. Why don't I make sure I'm on the other side of the stadium? You can do that before you even hit purchase. Plus, it's backed by the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime picks. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON, COLLEGE, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Looking around the Big 12 a little bit, as we will do this whole week, this Big 12 is crazy. But the craziest game, allegedly, I mean, you can argue what that is. The craziest game of the weekend, I think, was BYU-Arizona State. And there was so many nuts things that happened. You know, the double field storm, Kenny Dillingham just mother effing the refs on a hot mic. The Hail Mary that falls just short. There were so many crazy things in this game. And yet, the controversy coming out of it, the prevailing story coming out of it, is a video taken by someone at Sun Devil Stadium that works security. They filmed a video and put it on, I think it was TikTok, but maybe it was Instagram, of the BYU locker room at halftime. Now it's outside, but you can hear a player, from what I'm hearing, just dressing down the team and using a lot of expletives to do so. In fact, I was trying to get a bit of this video to put on here, but there's too many expletives. Like, I didn't want to run the risk of demonetizing the video on YouTube or trying to put in all the bleeps. But, it's from what I know about football and what goes on in those locker rooms, not that crazy. Now, you can hear it pretty clearly. The guy, and they've got captions on it too. The guy is yelling, and he's very animated from what it sounds like, and there's a lot of 4-letter words thrown around there. And for some reason, this is sparking controversy. Like, it's become a big buzz on the internet and on Twitter specifically. And like, for what? For what? Because he said a couple of no words? Like, this is not Pop Warner football. We need to grow up here, people. And I think probably most of it is because it's BYU and it's all buttoned up, LDS people. But like, they love their football. I think even most of the BYU fans are like, yeah, that's college football. That's just what it's like. You know what I mean? Like, that's, to me, I hear it and I'm just like, okay, what am I missing here? And yet there is a storm on social media about why this is bad for BYU, why it's bad for the sport, bad for kids that like it. It's like, what? What do you want a locker room to sound like? Like, this topic fascinated me. Not, because it's a Big 12 story, but I just can't believe that there is an uproar about this, because I got to thinking, would this be an uproar at Baylor? And as much as I want to say, of course not, I think there would be some pearl clutching from Baylor for the same reasons it is at BYU. Religious school, we're supposed to be above that. Good Christians don't cuss like that. It's like, give me a break. Because I'm sure those are some of the same people. Like, this is a divisive part of the fan base, but I'm sure there are some other people that root for Baylor that are talking about, why is Dave Aranda so emotionless? Why is he not showing any emotion on the sideline? Why isn't he yelling at guys? Why isn't he celebrating or throwing the headset or anything like that? Like, you would love for Dave Aranda to be saying those same things. And yet there are other parts of the Baylor fan base that will agree with some of the weirdos on Twitter that are like, this can't be happening. They need to be above this. It's bizarre. It's bizarre that there is such a pushback on this. And I feel for some of the BYU people that are like, I get we need to be at a higher standard. That's what we set for ourselves. But we're standardizing the wrong things here. Like, this team that people, whether it be Baylor or BYU or any college in America, like, they put so much into this. This is their lives and could be their livelihood, right? I mean, these guys are getting paid. Some of them are hoping to get to the NFL. Some of them need the scholarship and need the success to get noticed. Like, and the coaching staff, this is their livelihood. Like, there's a lot of emotion into this. And I guarantee you, no one in that locker room is complaining about it on Twitter. Nobody. Even the most hardcore LDS or in Baylor's locker room, most hardcore Texas Baptist, they're not complaining about swearing happening during a halftime motivational speech. And to the worker at Sun Devil Stadium who recorded this and then posted it online, what are you doing? What are you doing? Is this not, like, this should be frowned upon in stadium security? And I don't usually call for people to lose their jobs. I don't. But, like, that is an offense where you need to consider who you've got working there. You know what I mean? Like, that's when these teams come to a stadium, the host team, the away team, the conference, most of the people working in the arena, like, they kind of have a responsibility. If Kalani Sitake goes to the press conference microphone and just starts ripping people to shreds with cuss words and mother effing and whatever, that is one thing. But if he's doing it in the locker room, or one of his players is doing it in the locker room, that is within the locker room. I'm sorry. And, like, we shouldn't have security people going through the halls and recording it just to post online. Like, that's weird. And by the way, if you walk over to Kenny Dillingham's locker room, you think you're going to hear nursery rhymes? Like, come on. It's very odd. And BYU should kind of be pissed about this, if we're being honest. But again, I found that very weird, and find it very weird that people are clutching their pearls over this. Like, what do you expect? Come on. This should be a non-story, non-controversy. And maybe they'll need some more strongly worded halftime speeches if BYU is going to get to the Big 12 championship game and hopefully for them get to the college football playoff. We'll see. It is basketball season, kind of, although we are really still focused on football, especially at Baylor. But there is a 5-star who could be committing to the Bears today. We'll tell you about him coming up on Locked On Baylor. But first, FanDuel, you know it as America's #1 sportsbook. And if you go right now, boy, do we have the deal for you. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you're getting your hunch in the middle of the game, we've all been there, right? You want the stats and the data in front of you, and you can do that through FanDuel Sportsbook because on the same page where you place your bets, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more. Or even if you're just a hunch guy, a gut guy, or a gut gal, FanDuel Sportsbook is the only place to go. You just visit FanDuel.com to join today because, again, you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. It's basketball commit season. Well, it is kind of basketball season as well. But the Bears, this is something in the last couple of years that Baylor's become really good at and become really invested in, is the commitment of some of the top players in America. And today is no different because this Tuesday afternoon, Chris Sinak, a 5-star center, number 10 in the nation in this class of 2025, according to On3, will make his decision on where he's going. And he's got it down to 7 schools, not 3 or 4. It's 7 right now, and Baylor is chief among them. You also got Kentucky. You've also got Houston. You've also got Tennessee. You've also got LSU, which would constitute his hometown team because I don't think he's considering Tulane. But Sinak is from New Orleans. He actually was playing high school at Newman, which is where the Mannings went. That's how you might know Newman. All of them went there. Cooper, Peyton, Eli, and Arch all went to Newman. And now he is at Link Academy, which is where Jacoby Walter played his final season of high school basketball. Same with Trey Johnson, a former Baylor target who's now starring for the Texas Longhorns. And Sinak has said this year that location-wise, geographically, doesn't really matter where he's going. He says, I'm not like someone who is nailed down to a certain region or a certain state. I can go anywhere, anywhere that's going to give me a great chance at developing into a top 10 NBA pick and one with great relationships with the coaches. Both of those, year after year, fit Baylor. They don't always fit Tennessee. They haven't fit LSU very much recently. One of those definitely fits Houston, and I think will continue to fit Houston. I think they'll start to produce real NBA guys here pretty soon. But so far, with those schools I've read, other than Kentucky, Baylor is the only one that hits both of those boxes consistently year after year. And Kentucky, the consensus around Kentucky is that they're out of the picture for Sinak. And Jamie Shaw of On3 basically has it at Tennessee, Houston, and LSU, which bummed me out. He had something about that last week. And from what I'm hearing around Baylor and Baylor recruiting, take this for what it's worth, is that Baylor is still a player here for Chris Sinak. They wouldn't consider themselves the front runner, but it is not like they have given up, which they have done with some other top recruits. And giving up is strong, but you know what I mean? Not prioritizing. They don't feel they're in the driver's seat for this, but they still feel good enough that they have still been recruiting Chris Sinak. So they don't feel that they're out of this picture yet. And again, he's putting 7 schools at the podium it sounds like. 7 hats. And it's not been great in terms of the 2 blowout losses in ranked games for Baylor this year. They've also won 2 other ranked games. But those 2 teams, Kentucky and Baylor, are the ones that hit those 2 boxes that Chris Sinak has said that this is what I'm looking for in a program. And Kentucky does feel they're out of it. Arkansas, another one, they feel like they're out of it. That would have to check both boxes as well. John Calipari puts plenty of guys in the pros, and a lot of his former players have kids that go and play for John Calipari. So I'd say the relationships are pretty good too. But Baylor, I know it's been a lot of talk recently about the one and done thing. I'm seeing that as like the prevailing concern with these 2 lopsided losses against Gonzaga and Tennessee, where the one and done doesn't work. It doesn't work. To which I'd say, I kind of agree with that. I did a whole thing about it after they got knocked out of the tournament last year, a whole segment about it, and how the last one and done team, true one and done team to win the national championship was Duke 10 years ago. And that era is kind of gone, but this is an interesting era we're going into here because the COVID years are done after this year. And you can't just tell Scott Drew, hey, don't get the most talented players in the country. Don't go and get them. We don't want them. And I think this year is a good blend. I mean, because you call it a one and done team, they have 2 one and done guys. And only one of them is in the starting lineup. So I don't see this as a one and done team. Now, you did bring in 2 guys from the transfer portal who only have 1 year of eligibility. So I don't think that's what these people are talking about, but you could argue that there's no continuity there. But they're guys who have each started over 100 games in their career. So and they've been to the Final Four. So they've got plenty of real good experience there. So next year, what does that look like? You've already got Tunde Yesufu to sign on or commit to sign on. Actually, no, he's signed. Tunde Yesufu was signed 2 weeks ago. And now Chris Sinak could be the next one. And you could be building some super talented front courts here next year with a lot of young guys. And without the COVID years, with those gone, you could make an argument that one and done model could be making a comeback. We'll just have to wait and see. But can they outduel LSU, Houston, Tennessee? Maybe they'll get a win over Tennessee this time. And then still Arkansas and Kentucky and get Chris Sinak. Be very interesting. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do they even have a shot going up against those schools the way Baylor's playing right now? Let that be known down in the comments section below. Let me know what you think about Jeff Grimes' return to Waco and what that could mean. And what is a locker room supposed to sound like? Are we just going to hold Baylor and BYU to higher standards of what you could say in a locker room? Because I think that's kind of stupid. Drop that down in the comments below, especially if you disagree with me. And be sure to like and subscribe. Guys, that helps out a ton. Most of you watching or listening are not subscribed. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you like the video, like the video. It's pretty simple. And you can ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping videos on YouTube and then wherever you get your podcast. I really appreciate the heck out of you guys. The growth of this channel has been awesome, specifically the last couple of months here. You guys have been a really great and loyal fan base, and I cannot be more thankful for that. And I want to thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back tomorrow. Sounds like a Wicker Wednesday is coming on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.